One of the key narratives of the Russian disinformation is that the Russian invaders came to Donbas to protect the Russian-speaking people. According to the Russian propagandists, they were protecting them from Ukrainian nationalists, represented by roughly 100% of Ukrainian-speaking population, because if you speak Ukrainian, it obviously makes you a nationalist. And based on that, the Russians deny Ukraine's sovereignty, claiming that Ukraine belongs to the Russian people. But what is life like in Donetsk, and are citizens of Donetsk and Luhansk happy to have the Russian passports today? How much development and wealth were brought to these cities by the Russian Federation? Let's talk about this right now. In this video, we will be talking primarily about Donetsk, because Donetsk was, this majestic, beautiful city the size of Kyiv, while Luhansk was, I would say, rather depressive. Both Donetsk and Luhansk had heavily subsidized industries that basically only survived due to the state donations, because they were managed by the pro-Russian government of Ukrainian dictator Yanukovych, who comes from Donbas himself. Due to those donations, Donetsk was considered one of the most modern cities in Ukraine. In 2012, for example, this city hosted the Euro 2012 football competition. This is what the Donbas arena looked like back in 2012, and this is pretty much what it looks like today. At the same time, Donetsk, all the way until 2022, was considered the most intact Ukrainian city on the occupied territory. For comparison, this is a photo of Donetsk bombed by Ukraine for 8 years, and this is a photo of Mariupol bombed by Russia for just a couple of months. Now, you may think that the citizens of Donetsk were really happy to finally become unrecognized citizens of the terrorist federation and expected the wealth to start flowing into their city. However, one thing they've learned really fast is that in reality Russia doesn't give a slightest damn about the territory it occupies. Just for comparison, this is Abkhazian region of Georgia before and after the Russian annexation of this region. Basically, you understand the trend. Reality is Russia doesn't care about restoring the occupied territories because they generally look like most of the Russian regions. I mean, this is the natural condition for places like Russian Kolyma or Omsk. This is basically what the Russian liberation looks like in reality. And now you might argue that since Donbas is so rich in natural resources, its industries must have been thriving after the Russian annexation, right? Wrong. In 2013, it was estimated that 95 coal mines were active in Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts before the war. You can imagine the impressive amount of Ukrainian coal delivered around the world by Ukrainian enterprises. By mid-2023, the number of mines in occupied territories dropped to just 18 active mines, with only 2 operating at around 30% capacity. Russia initiated plans to reduce the total inventory of 114 mines, including those under conservation or liquidation, to just 15 operational mines across the occupied regions. According to open sources, Russian investors kinda leased 15 mines in the occupied Donbas, but in 2024 relinquished 9 of them due to unprofitability, leaving just 6 still operating, which suggests only a handful of coal mines in Donbas remain in production as of 2025. We're talking just a handful out of 95, meaning not only Russia didn't build new coal mines, it literally shut down existing ones due to low profit. Now, what does the process of protection of Russian-speaking people in Donbas look like in real life? Basically, the Russians claimed that people in Donetsk and Luhansk were under threat from Ukraine and needed rescuing. Putin called it a humanitarian mission. Russian media pushed the idea that Donbas was full of oppressed Russians who were begging for Moscow to save them. But if you fast forward to what actually happened, it's the exact opposite of protection. Because once Russia occupied parts of Donbas, they started basically treating the local people like disposable resources. We're talking no jobs, collapsing services, mines being closed, factories being disassembled and relocated to the Russian territory, and so on. And then with the full-scale invasion, Moscow turned the same Russian-speaking Ukrainians into cannon fodder. We know that during the very first days of the Russian invasion, the Russians closed borders for the male population on the occupied territory. So basically they could not move out, and later they were thrown straight into the worst fighting places like Bakhmut, Avdiivka and Vuhledar. We're talking the lines of poorly armed and barely trained men from Donbas being sent into near certain death to probe Ukrainian defenses or exhaust their ammo. As a result of the Russian mobilization in Donbas, the area lost majority of its male population. Basically, instead of saving the Russian-speaking people of Donbas, Russia occupied their towns, wrecked their economy, militarized their schools, and sent their men to die in a war they've never asked for. Today, Donietsk, formerly majestic Ukrainian city, looks like a wasteland where people struggle to survive without the basic services available to the population. For example, the power outages are plaguing Donetsk since 2022. It's a known fact. The kids in schools are either studying Putin's version of history or go to Russian military camps for kids. The hospitals are overcrowded by wounded Russian soldiers, and there is a little chance to find help in a local clinic. But the situation with water supply is the worst, because since 2014 Russia didn't repair even a single water pipe in Donetsk city. Think about it. In 2025, in a big European city, you have families collecting water from puddles because the running water in Donetsk is only available once in 2-3 days, and it only lasts for about an hour. The quality of water you can pretty much see yourself on numerous videos from the Donetsk citizens who are not too shy to post it on the social media. The craziest fact is that Ukraine used to keep that water system running. You will be surprised to learn that even after Russia took control over those territories, there were different quiet agreements and technical workarounds to provide people with running water, basically to show that Ukraine still cares about its citizens on the occupied territories. But over time, those systems failed, and Russia didn't step in, didn't invest, and generally didn't care. And today, in the middle of summer, with heat waves rolling through and people getting sick from dehydration, the Russian regime just leaves the infrastructure to rot. They tell the Donetsk citizens to hold on, but of course nobody believes them anymore. Of course, it's absolutely different in Moscow. Tucker Carlson, for example, will happily show you clean Russian subways or cheap groceries, as if he's found a hidden utopia. You know, this is what they don't show in the media. But the reality is he won't go to the apartment building in Donetsk where the water hasn't run in 3 days. And he won't film the women fetching the water from puddles because Russia abandoned the citizens in Donetsk. He won't sit down with families who remember the times when Donetsk has been visited by millions of football fans from around the world, and the people had food, they had services, education, running water, and no Russian invaders on the streets. Tucker Carlson, Tim Pool, and other Russian propagandists made a very good attempt to portray Russia as a peaceful, thriving land. The reality is Russia brings decay wherever it goes. Abkhazia, South Ossetia, Donbas, Crimea, you name it. And the only difference is that Tucker Carlson is watched by millions, while civilians in Donetsk can only show their reality to a handful of people scared of being repressed by the Russian invaders. This is basically all you wanted to know about Russian liberation of Donbas. And with that, my dear friends and family, I wish you a beautiful day. I'll see you in the comments. My name is Operator Starsky, and as always, be safe.